So we'll call the meeting to order and look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest from committee. Not seeing any. I just wanted to start off real quick by saying happy Day of the Girl, as well as just want to say hi to London Youth Advisory Committee for joining us here today. Hey guys. And we'll look at consent items to see if any items want to be pulled. Councillor Squire, please.
I wonder if we might deal with item number 7 and 17 together. They're somewhat related. I don't expect 17 will be very long. It's not a public participation meeting. And with the indulgence, I've been sick for a couple of days. I was hoping I could make my escape earlier rather than later.
Sure, anything to get rid of you. Unless then there's any objections from committee. So Councillor Armstrong, number 6. Any others? All right, so we'll get a motion. Sorry, Councillor Usher.
I have a brief question to ask on 4 and 5, but I don't want to pull it. I'd just like to ask the question, if I may.
Sure, go ahead and we'll get the motion up in the meanwhile.
Okay, with respect to 4, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering if we've been through, I know they talk about healthy liquid, but I'm wondering, there was a time when we considered pulling these out of the machines in our premises, and we decided to keep it. But I wonder if there is any concession for sugar content in any of these. Can anybody answer that?
Through the chair, I can start. We followed council's direction with respect to renewing this contract. So while there are and so the direction we took was to make sure that there would be healthy options. So there is juice, there are machines that have no pop in them, there are no energy drinks with caffeine added. So we followed that direction. Where there are multiple machines at a site, there are some of the less healthy options, if I can say it that way, but we stayed true to the spirit and direction from council.
And that's satisfactory for me for that one. The reason I ask this is because I don't want, say, 2 or 3 years down the road, a recommendation comes back and we start looking at this all over again. So the healthy option is very important from my perspective at this time. With respect to item number 5, I noticed that the signatures for approval doesn't have anybody from HR or from finance. Is this usual? I don't remember something like this that is costing us money ever come this way before. I don't know who could answer that question for me, whether a finance person could respond to that, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, it is already an approved budget item, and this is a contracted services, so it's not, we're not hiring an individual directly, so we don't need HR approval, and because it's already an approved budget within the budget complement, we don't need, we typically don't have finance sign off as well.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to comment on number 4 as well. I want to thank staff for what they've brought forward. This is second best, in my opinion. You know, the first option was to take the vending machines right out, and I will always be a proponent of that. It seems to me to be direct marketing to children, which is what we don't want to do, but we sent you back, the council sent you back with a mandate to get healthier options in those machines, and I think you've done that, and you've increased revenue for the city at the same time, almost doubling it, so in the first year anyway. So kudos to staff.
And the motion is up, so we'll get a mover and seconder on screen. Seeing no further speakers, we'll call the question. Councillor Usher is voting manually, yay, and we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0 with Harold Usher voting manually.
Item number 6, Councillor Armstrong.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I just wanted to take a minute. This is a project that's, well, been in the works for, I think, 12 years. And I want to take this opportunity, because I may not have an opportunity at council, to thank our staff for the work that they've done on this project. Bill Coxhead, Lynn Lubert, and many others, countless hours of work out there in the evenings, meeting with the community, finding out what they were looking for as far as the community center and indoor pool is concerned. So I just want to reach out to all of them, thank them very much. Our whole entire community, Argyle, is looking forward to this project and its completion. So through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted 2 quick questions. Are we still on track for perhaps the end, if weather is good, of 2018?
Through the chair, the timeline is early 2019, and we are still on track for that.
Okay, and the second question I had for you, we've always called it the East Community Center Project, et cetera, but, you know, we have a new policy to do with naming rights. If there's somebody out there that wants to, you know, contribute to a building, et cetera. So I'm just wondering, are we still looking at that, or is this going to be the name? Is that up in the air still?
So through the chair, the East Community Center is really a placeholder at this point. We're always open to following our policy around naming of our buildings. And so at this point, it's the East Community Center until we get to a place of it being fully open and ready with perhaps a different name.
Well, again, thanks to all the staff for the work they've done on this. Much appreciated.
So the motion's up on the screen. Councillor Usher?
Just a quick question, Mr. Chair. I just want to know about the contingency in this project. I'm looking at the bid for the contractor, and it looks like it's the same money that we're asking for in finance. So how do we allocate any contingency for this?
Thank you. Through the chair, there is a construction contingency that's built into the contractor's cost allotment, so it's an allowance within his costs.
Perfect, thanks.
Seeing no further speakers, we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Item number 7, I guess 17, Councillor Squire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for letting me deal with both matters at once. I would be really remiss if I didn't recognize the members of the London Youth Advisory Council who are here. I had a chance to meet with them on this particular issue, and I can tell you they're very interested in it. They're very aware of it. They're very well educated on it. They scared me a little bit. They're so up to date on everything. And I look forward to continuing to work with them on this. It's something that's been near and dear to my heart for a long time, and it's good to see that they're interested also. I want to particularly recognize Moise Tahir. Moise, I told him when he started with this that I would stay with him on it, sort of until we got to the end, and I think we're getting to the beginning of the end today, hopefully. In addition, I just want to speak to number 7 first. I'm very glad this is coming forward, and I think one of the benefits you'll see from doing a 2-year program is we were able to find a funding source that isn't, as I understand it, going to affect our operating budget within that period of time. However, we'll be getting statistics during that period with regard to the uptake of the low-income bus pass that will enable us in the future to understand how much we will need to fund it. And that is one of the challenges with any of these programs. We frankly don't know what they're going to cost. We don't have entirely accurate statistics to tell us what they're going to cost. But there is a gap, and I wanted to try to move towards addressing that gap, and ultimately council will have to decide whether they're going to or not. But there's a group that, in my view, is not recognized and is not given a break in our transit as other groups is, and those are people aged 13 to 17. A group that obviously is not fully employed, does not qualify under any other basis, and just understand the difference that they face. A high school student now who maybe travels to Beale or some other school because they don't get their own bus transportation has to pay $81 a month for a bus pass. Let's So we're almost looking at $1,000 a year for them to pay for busing. University students, because they have a bulk contract, are paying about $230 to $250 a year for a bus pass. Nobody's fault. I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. They just struck a very good deal, and we're able to do that. But that's an inequity that I believe as a council we need to address, or at least try to address. And that's why I brought forward this motion today, to at least move to the next step and have a youth bus pass presented as a budget case. Nobody's asking for approval today on anything. What I'm looking for is a commitment to say, look, we're going to have a good look at this. We're going to try to be creative. We're going to try to come back with numbers that make sense so we can offer this. One of the things we have to do, regardless of BRT or anything else, is try to grow our ridership. And the only way, from my point of view, we're going to know how we grow our ridership is to try different cases to test our ridership. And this is just one of those. And because it's only a 2-year pilot, we will be creative, and we will be able to be creative in how we pay for this, and it may not affect the operating budget. You know, I looked at Kingston, and Ms. Carter, who was Vice President of the Student Council herself, gave me some numbers on the Kingston model. I just want you to understand what they do in Kingston. 2 school boards each threw in some money, and they offer a free bus pass, a free zero-cost bus pass to all of their high school students. They don't pay anything. There was no tax increase. There was an operating effect on their budget of about $65,000 to $90,000 if they did it on a full-time basis. It is doable from my point of view, and I think we just need the time, the energy, and the commitment in the next month or so to do that, and I think we can. So that's why I'm asking that we move ahead with this particular motion. I just want you to all keep in mind, and just as I finish, in the City of London right now, I understand we have about 4,000 bus passes that are out there, including everyone. 4,000 bus passes. 1% only of London's population carries a bus pass. We have to do better. We have to do better. And if we can sell more at a lower cost, increase our revenue, I think that's a good thing. So I know that I spoke to the chair, and he's prepared, and I appreciate it, having worked with you before on busing, that you would second my motion to have this go to the budget process. And so I'm prepared to move it, and if the chair seconds it, I look forward to the committee's support. Understanding I'm not asking for a commitment today. I'm just asking that we look at it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Squire. Happy to second that, and we'll get that up on the screen. And just looking for any speakers on this item. Councillor Cassidy, Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question on item number 7. Under the eligibility stage on page 33, it says that, and we knew this when we directed staff to go forward with this, that it would be adults 18 and over that would qualify. So what about, you know, there are economically disadvantaged youth that, you know, their parents are not going to be able to afford a bus pass for them. They can't afford a bus pass, and they may need to get to employment as well, especially if they're economically disadvantaged. They may be contributing to the household income. So it's laudable what Councillor Squires brought forward, but I think and so that may solve this problem there. But if we don't go forward at budget time, if we decide not to go forward with a youth bus pass or a subsidized youth bus pass, is there any way that we could expand the subsidized LICO pass to include that age range 13 to 17 that are below LICO?
Through the chair, so I want to be clear that report number 7 deals with the adult low-income pass and outlines for council our suggested approach for implementation. Should council wish to direct us to broaden the class of who would be eligible for that, we would be able to address that. We would still have to have a process for eligibility, and it would rely on family eligibility at that point, but we could look at that. That is different than, as you've stated, than number 17, which is looking at all youth between 13 and 17.
Under existing subsidies that people qualify for under OW and ODSP, Does that cover youth under some of those subsidies already?
So through the chair, yes, it is done for youth now through OW, but we wouldn't necessarily be talking about all youth that are participating in the OW program. This would, if you're moving to low income, we would then be looking at the family low income pieces of information that would be required. So yes, we could do it for youth who are participating in OW, but we'd also have to look at the family for the other side. And I wouldn't like to do that detailed work here. If that's the direction of council, then I would prefer that we be directed to bring it back to you.
Sorry, Councillor Squire, was it a point of order or?
No, I just wanted to respond to it. I think it's a very simple answer that everyone's missing, but.
I'll come back to you. Councillor Usher?
I'm quite prepared to allow him to say what he wants to say before I start speaking, because I might, mine might be exactly the opposite to what he wants to say, so.
Sure. Councillor Squire?
When I drafted my motion, if you look at clause E, I didn't want this to be the final and only answer. So I said, this proposal shall be referred to the budget deliberations for 2010, et cetera, which shall include alternative proposals costs. I put in alternative proposals purposely so that if staff wanted to come back and say, look, you can do a full youth pass, or you can do a youth pass that's limited in some way. I know what my preference is, but I've included that in there because that was my expectation. So I don't think anything additional is needed, and I think Councillor Cassidy, if she's expressing a desire to know what the cost of just a lower income youth bus pass, I think we can do that in this process. I'd be happy as I move along to make sure that it's addressed.
Councillor Usher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Mr. Chair, I see 7 and 17 as two separate, different items, and I don't think we should confuse this issue. And the reason for that is because we've spent a lot of time coming up with this proposal that we have it, as we have it in item number 7, and we should deal with that separately. Item number 17 was also something that we discussed at that time, and we rejected it at that time. So I don't want to get confused with 7 and 17. Although they're dealing with the same entity, we're not dealing with the same motion, and in some respects, it's totally separate. So I don't know which one I want to address, because I would really like to address 7 and get it over with and approve that, because we've pretty well agreed that this is the way we should go with 17. If we want to add in 7, if we want to add what 7 is proposing here, then that's a whole different story. So you've got to tell me which one I'm going to address, whether I'm going to address 7 or 17, please, because I see 17 up.
Sure.
I'm quite prepared to address 17. So let me know which one I'm
So sure, just for cleanliness, we'll do 17 since the motion's already up, and then we'll come back to you on 7.
Okay, it's a little bit more difficult to address 17 after 7. I'd like to do 7 first. Anyway, I am a firm believer that I'd like to see someday that we have 100% free transit for ridership. And what that means is that we would have to pay the cost of transit via some other means, whether it's property taxes or federal and provincial government, et cetera, I don't know. But the fact is that we don't have that today. And we came up with a formula for transit as it is today, and with the formula that we have with respect to youth, and by youth I'm talking about younger than 12, and seniors who are under a certain level of income. This motion that I am seeing here from my colleague, Councillor Squire, is for high school students, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, it says ages 13 to 17. And whereas in some respects I would agree with it, in this particular instant, I can't agree with this motion, because what this motion is saying here is it's practically saying after the 2-year trial, we will go ahead with it. And, you know, I can't say that. If you want to go with a 2-year trial, you go with a 2-year trial, and then we reconsider it at the time to decide whether or not we want to go that way. I think that we have to find another formula for high school students. I heard talk about university and franchise students paying $250 per year. I don't think that that's what they pay. I think they pay much less. But that's a business case. That's strictly a business case whereby all of those students pay into that and some of them use it. And, you know, that balances out hopefully at the end of the year, at the end of the term, whatever. In this particular case, we're not asking for any business case. We're just asking to allow it. We don't have enough money to do what we want to do right now with people in lower income and kids under 12 as it is, because it's going to cost a lot more money than we have here, and we don't even know where we're going to get that money. I believe that somewhere here we had about $450,000 to accommodate this, and I believe it's going to cost over $1 million to be able to do that, and we're going to have to draw that money. If we include this population of 13 to 17, we're talking about another few $100,000. Like I said, I'm not against it on a whole, but I'm against it at this point in time on that individual portion basis, because we discussed this before, and unless the school board is going to find some money to pay for this so that we could make it as a business case, I just can't agree with it at this point in time.
Councillor Usher, did you want to, sorry, Councillor Squire and Councillor Cassidy.
I feel I need to clarify at this point because my motion was just misrepresented in every single way that it's written, quite frankly. First of all, it says in it, at the end of the pilot period, council shall consider the continuation of the pass on a permanent basis. Nowhere in it does it say it is a permanent step. Nowhere in it. So to say that it's just going to go ahead after the 2 years is just, I'm sorry, but that's inaccurate. It also, there seems to be some indication that we're not sending it off as a business case, that it's being approved today. Let me read clause E. This proposal shall be referred to the budget deliberations for 2018 as a proposed business case. Nobody is approving anything today. All I'm saying is that I'll work really hard in the next month and a half to come back in the budget process with a business case that council can then say yay or nay to. But, you know, I was really careful in the wording of this, and it is a little discouraging when people are saying it says something that it absolutely does not. So, it is a 2-year pilot, end of story. It is not being approved today. It is being referred merely as a business case to the budget process, and that's all that is happening today.
Cliff Note Squire, Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I have a question for Councillor Squire. So I know that he has had talks with the school board officials, and also as Councillor Squire is the chair of the liaison committee with both school boards, and I sit on that committee as well. And I know Councillor Squire brought this forward at that meeting and discussed the Kingston model with them. So through you, Mr. Chair, has there been any update or response from the school boards?
The school boards have, let me talk about Thames Valley District School Board. They have not taken it to the board yet. They felt it was premature, as I understand it from speaking to their chair, until we came up with something. The model that I had talked to with them was the Kingston model of them making a contribution merely during the pilot period. And that was supported, I believe, to some extent by their staff, although not yet by the boards themselves. I'm going to continue to work at that. I also spoke with the Director of Education, London District Catholic School Board, and there's a commitment to continue to work on it at that level. So no, we haven't finalized anything, but talks are continuing.
Thank you for that. And so, you know, given that we're exploring and it's a pilot and it's transit is something that is constantly, we constantly come back to that when we're dealing with economically disadvantaged, the people in our community that are economically disadvantaged. Transit is one of the #1 issues that we need to address to allow them to get around the city in a convenient and efficient way. So, and again, all of the things that the 3 different kinds of subsidies and passes that that we've discussed as council, the 12 and under, free transit, the subsidized pass for those people living under LICO, and then this youth pass. These were all things that came up during poverty panel discussions. People in the community identified these three particular things as things they would like to see happen in the city. So I'm supportive of this going forward. I'm supportive of hearing back from staff and getting a possible business case brought forward. And I definitely would, I don't think we need to change Councillor Squire's motion or amend it in any way, but I would like to see one, the possibility of all youth, and then the possibility of only youth living under LICO, if that's possible.
Van Holst, Councillor Van Holst, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it's like Councillor Squire got a lawyer to write this up. We wonder about costs for these things, and I do wonder if we need to think about our transit system a little differently. Once we've paid for the drivers and the buses and the thing is running, the riders don't actually add much of a unit cost. We can put more and more people on the bus, and that's what we should be shooting for. Once we've got a system that's going, having as many people riding it as possible for essentially the same price will be our goal, because at that point we're trying to move drivers away from the cars. And so I don't know that the looking at it as if every additional rider is going to cost us so much is really accurate. So we'll have to look at a different model in terms of visualizing the funding. But I think it's great. We're at least considering these things. I think they should go forward to the budget, and with those kind of considerations of the budget, we may find some maybe. Some pleasant surprises. So, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers, Mr. Councillor Helmer.
Well, I want to thank Councillor Squire for his work on the youth discounted pass. I know something he's been working on for quite a while, and I want to recognize Moise and the folks who've been working on it outside of the council horseshoe. I think it's really important. It's certainly something I support, and I wonder, there's different ways of approaching it, and I think, as Councillor Van Holst is pointing out, there's a difference between the marginal cost of additional riders when your bus is not at capacity, and the marginal cost of riders when your bus is at capacity. And certainly on some routes we have the situation where we really can't accept more riders without adding more buses, and that's a pretty significant cost. We have to get more drivers out on the road, and we have to get more buses on the road. There's many routes where that's not the case. And, there is capacity within the existing fleet and the existing service that there could be more people on the bus, and the additional cost, operating cost of more people is really not that significant. It's not nothing, because there is the dwell time as people are boarding and all kinds of things that come up from an operational perspective, but it's not hugely significant. I think that the model that has been demonstrated by the Western Students' Council, Fanshawe, and the Society of Graduate Students is where we should be headed for some of these programs. What happens there, as Councillor Squire has pointed out, is that, for a cost of around $230 a year, every student is able to ride the bus. And it's very simple. It's very easy to get your pass. It's very easy. Everyone knows they can ride the bus if they need to. Some people ride it a lot. Some people ride it not at all. Some people ride it only occasionally. And it manages to work out for the Transit Commission. It provides a lot of additional revenue that probably otherwise wouldn't be realized, just by simplifying the process of getting your pass. And it makes it so easy to ride the bus that I think it drives up the ridership on that front. I think we can be thinking about other ways that we could replicate that model. And I think as a council, we need to be thinking about, we provide London Transit Commission with, say, $29 million in operating funding, which really has no strings attached. It's like, here's our contribution to cover off transit for everybody who's paying fares. Another option would be to say, how about we give you a little bit less money in your operating grant, and instead what we're going to do is we're going to buy bus passes for everybody in a certain age category in the City of London. You could ride the bus for free. And what we're doing with the pass that's 12 and under is to essentially say, as people incur the costs we will cover off the difference between your regular fare and zero. That's one way of doing it. The other way is to just say, we're just gonna buy for this whole population group and we're gonna figure out a price that makes sense. And we'll see what the actual uptake is, and if we have to negotiate the price over time, that's what we do with the students. The price for that changes over time depending on usage. As we add more service, we say, well, you know, I have to pay more for this. It's, it's costing us more, we're gonna need more money from you. And we've just entered into multi-year agreements with those student groups that has built-in escalations around the price. So I think just as the Society of Graduate Students and the Students' Council and Fanshawe Student Union are the buyers of the passes, there's nothing to say the City of London can be the buyers of the passes. And I think that that's a model we should be considering. If you think about the cost for the consumers, the people riding the bus, and the cost to the city under different models, if you were to have the 52-29 split, which is the regular price is 81, and the discounted price is going to be 52, the cost to a consumer is still $624 a year, right? Which is, you know, more than double what it costs a Western student. And, you know, I think that that frankly doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think it only makes sense if the only people who are buying them are the people who are riding a lot. I think that's the only way it makes sense. But I think if we were to say there's only 22,645 total young people in the City of London in that age category. You know, look at the census, you can see how many people there are. There's 22,000. That's fewer than there are students who are already going through the tuition pass programs, right? So if you were to just provide that same price and just buy for everyone, that's $5.2 million. Now it seems like a lot, but $5.2 million and every single young person in that age group, 13 to 17, would be able to ride the bus for free, just like everybody who's between 0 and 12. And so you would have every single young person in the City of London be able to ride the bus for free. And if you were to use the same price, which works for the student union, that's only $5.2 million. Now, if that was an additional expenditure and it was ongoing every year, obviously we'd have to make some big changes to make that happen. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that. I don't think that the Transit Commission would see such a huge uptake of people on routes that are already busy that they would incur a lot of increased operating costs. And I think there might be a model there where we can say, we're just gonna buy for everyone and it's gonna be free. And we will see what the actual increased costs are. And then as we see those increased costs, we can perhaps renegotiate on the price. I think the take up, if you were to say transit's free for all these 22,000 people, not 22,000 people are gonna take the bus. You know, that's just not gonna happen. People are gonna get around other ways. As soon as some people get driver's licenses, that's all they wanna do is drive. But I do think we have to be open to that. I'm glad that Councillor Squire's motion allows for that kind of discussion. I think that that's important because I think we have to figure out how we wanna go, which direction we're gonna go in. And if the goal is really increasing ridership and getting more people taking the bus, which frankly saves everybody a lot of money in the long run to have people on transit, I think we have to be open to that kind of conversation. I really look forward to having that.
I just want to, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm glad you're on the London Transit Commission with me, Councillor Squire. It's that kind of thinking that I think is important, and it's that kind of thinking we have to have. I didn't get a chance within my time to talk about that, but I thank him for that. Also remember, and I just wanted to add, the gas tax benefits of ridership. We increase ridership, we get more gas tax money, and so as we move into a BRT system, you know, we have to look at these creative approaches. So thank you, Councillor Helm.
So I'm seeing no further. Councillor Van Hulst.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, yeah, it is exciting that there's different possibilities. I hope staff will come to us with those options. You know, just a simple way to think about it too is we could simply tell transit, here's what you'll sell the bus passes for. If you run a deficit, we'll cover it. So different ways to look at how to deal with this situation in the flux that it will be in as ridership grows and as we try new programs.
And I'll call a question. Just a second. Councillor Usher.
I don't want to prolong the debate, and I'm not here to be negative about this. I said right at the beginning that my preference would be, at least my ultimate objective would be to see that everybody gets ride the bus for free. It's a matter of how we get there. And I'm not saying that this is not one way of getting there. What I'm saying is that when I read this motion, and I'm sorry that Councillor Squire thinks that against him that way. I'm not against him. But when I read the motion, it sounded to me that we're asking for staff to come up with a proposal to do this for a 2-year period, and then afterwards, we will continue with it. That's the way it is worded to me. If this is strictly to come up with a business case with different alternatives, not just one alternatives, but different alternatives as how we could get students or people, let's say young people of that age group, riding the bus, whether it's for free or for reduced cost, then that's okay with me. But I want to see that business case, and I want to see alternatives. I don't want to see just one. This is talking about the same monthly pass rate as the low bus pass being $52 per month. It may be $55 per month. It may be $47 per month. It may be free, you know. But I want to see the business case come forward with alternatives, not just that one business case. And that's, if that is what this motion is all about, then that's fine with me. But if we're just going to come with one alternative, just to look at that one alternative and say it's this or nothing, then I can't go with that. So I'm not sure that this motion is telling me that, that we're going to go with those alternatives, such as the type that I'm hearing from my colleagues.
So just from the chair, Councillor Usher, that's exactly what it is, the last part of what you captured about this just being a proposal. It'll come back to council, so the motion does read that way. But if there's any concerns or clarity that staff need, let me know at this time. Councillor Squire.
Everything that Councillor Usher says about just being in consideration is what I tried to incorporate. For instance, even the $52 rate, all I say is with consideration given to the same rate. In other words, think about it. I threw it out, I put it in there, and I want to be clear, as an option. And if you want, you know, a legal opinion as to whether I agree with what you're saying, I do. And I give you my undertaking that that's exactly what I will be doing as I hopefully get to work with staff on this, looking at different alternatives, including the one Councillor Helmer put forward.
Seeing no further speakers, call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Number 7, I know Councillor Usher, you wanted to speak to this?
No, Mr. Chair, I think I said enough with 17. I'll just move it.
Okay, moved by Councillor Usher, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Do it on the screen, please. First come, first served. Oh, sorry, questions. My apologies. Councillor Squire, Cassidy Squire. Councillor Usher, your microphone.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for maybe Ms. Pellegny, but staff might be able to answer it, I don't know. Or probably the two councillors on the board could answer it too. So Councillor Squire made a comment in the last debate about the number of people in London that have passes. So about 1% of the population have passes. And we absolutely do, it will be good for London in general to increase ridership. And one way of doing that is to get more people riding the bus at a younger age, so it becomes standard practice for them. But I know that there are a lot of people that take the bus on a regular basis that just can't afford a bus pass. So they take, if they work 3 days a week, they buy tickets for those 3 days a week. So I would like clarification on the number of actual people in London that are transit users, not just the number of people that have bus passes. Does anybody have that for me?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we don't know that exact number. Obviously, we sell strips of tickets and anybody can use them. So there's no way for us to know, you know, when someone's buying a strip of tickets, whether it's only them actually using them or whether they're buying them for a number of people. What we do know is through the household surveys that the city undertakes, they do ask whether or not people in your household are transit users. And I believe the last one was in the 30 to 35% range of Londoners. But the question is, do you use the bus? Have you used the bus once in the last year? So again, you know, a transit user versus a regular transit user, we really don't have that metric.
Helmer.
Yeah, just for the benefit of Councillor Cassidy, I know she worked hard on the advisory. I can't remember the name. What was it called? London for All?
Yeah, that report.
The London for All report, and two of the really key things in it, from my point of view, were the 12 and under free pass and the low income pass. And I just think she should be, commended for bringing that forward, and I think council should be commended for implementing those two parts of the report. I always viewed that report as being sort of a resource for us who are on council to see what areas we could go into that would help Londoners. And so I know we've done two of those, and I think it's really important that we recognize that and recognize her work. But I think now we've got one more leg maybe we can incorporate, and if that helps that 13 to 17 demographic that obviously is going to have lower income, I think that's a really good thing. So this is really a good thing for London in my view.
Who said Councillor Squire doesn't say nice things sometimes?
I'm sick.
So it's a medication. Councillor Usher?
Yeah, quick question to staff. I'm looking at page 35. I'm looking at the table under the financial impact, where we say that in 2018, we have $445,000 budgeted. Somewhere else, I think that we said that if everybody would use the service, it would cost over $1 million. So if I remember rightly, when we were talking about this at budget time, and we identified the $445,000, we talked about first come, first serve, or something to that effect. Can you tell me what the situation is? When this money, the $445,000 runs out, we still have customers coming. What are we going to do? Help me understand that. Because I think that there's another place where we said we'd go back and see if there's a place where we can draw that extra resources from.
Through the chair, so yes, it's not a first come, first serve. Whoever wishes to partake in getting a subsidized bus pass through this methodology will have access to that. We have a certain amount of funding that we can direct to support. We don't know what the uptake will be. The commitment of council is that it's essentially backstopped for the period of the pilot. And in 2019, once we have more experience, we would bring forward whatever a budget amendment we might need to support the program going forward. So that was the discussion, and that is the result of how we're moving forward for the pilot.
This question is for Mrs. Peletsny, and it's to do with ridership. I think that you know, as well as most people here, that I'm quite familiar with the fact that the more ridership we get, the more we get from the province with respect to the transit. But is this type of service going to increase our ridership? We have here, somewhere we have approximately so many people will be using it. Do we anticipate that with this generosity, it's going to increase? And do we know how much it would increase the ridership?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that's part of what will be evaluated during the pilot. What we don't know is, will this be simply a transfer of people that are currently paying $81 that will now take advantage of this lower pass, or will it attract new riders? That's part of the reason why this is being undertaken as a pilot, so we can measure those impacts.
Helmer?
Thank you. If I stay here all meeting, I'll get called every council name in the book. For Councillor Cassidy, from the National Household Survey, which is another source of how people get around the city, 2011 numbers are available. The proportion of workers who commute to work in London by public transit is 6.9%.
Seeing no further speakers, we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And thanks for everybody from the LTC as well as Shell Roof. Thanks for coming. Just up hanging out in the chamber. So we'll get to item number 10. Committee, you've seen an email that was circulated by the chair as he's not able to be here today. So I'll look to committee for direction on how they would like to proceed. So referring to number 10, Councillor Cassidy.
So I think we can defer that. This is the one where the delegation can't be here, but they wanted to, Mr. Cairns wanted to speak to, I don't know if it's Mr. or Ms., sorry. Wanted to speak to a specific clause on their report, right? So can we not just defer that clause to a future CAPS meeting?
Sure, so we can either defer it or we can approve it, because I think we have the wording of his intent. So it's up to you, and I'll look to you guys for direction.
Can the clerk please remind me again what that clause was all about?
So as she's pulling it up, I believe there was an intent to have, at the beginning of committees and council, wording to be read to remind folks about, it's on page 64, underneath 5. The City of London is committed to fostering an accessible, inclusive community wherein all members of the public have equitable access to municipal council and its activities. To facilitate this environment, the City of London offers supportive devices, communication supports, and adaptive technologies to those in attendance and those off-site. If you require assistance, please contact the city clerk. So up to you. Councillor Usher.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to move that we we move the whole report except for item number 5. We defer that to the next meeting. Refer it back to, I think we'd have to refer it back to the advisory committee. They're the ones who want to deal with it. They want to make some changes to it. Oh, okay. I thought that that's what they wanted to do. If they don't want to make any changes, why is it that we are going to do this thing?
So I can respond. So from my understanding, he wanted to be here today to talk to us and say, this is what we hope council will do and take on. So now we can either wait until a later date when he's available, or I see Councilor Cassidy wants to get something done, so I'll just stop talking.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Let's just move it. I think it's a wonderful thing for, to be read at the beginning of every council meeting, and I see no reason to defer. I was thinking of the email we got earlier from clerks talking about the delegation not being able to be here, and I thought that he really needed to speak to it, but seeing what, I don't think, if he wants to come at a later time and speak to us about issues like this, he can always come, but I don't think we need to defer this. I think we can go forward.
So speaking to the clerk on my left, that it appears that this is all he wanted was us to just achieve this, and sending him an open invite. Feel free to come whenever you like. I just did have a question through the chair to staff. I'm happy to support this, but is there any issue with the language that's here, or do you just need direction to just say we'll kind of move ahead with language that works, or is there any issue with the language at the beginning of meetings? I'm just wanting to see if there's any red flags. Maybe the clerks will know, I'm not sure.
Through the chair, I think that your city clerk will have a look at this in a little more detail, and perhaps in conjunction with someone from our AODA area to just ensure that the intent, their recommendation is in the spirit of the following wording, so I'm sure that we can work with what's proposed here.
Gotcha. So then in that instance, the motion that would be moved then, I guess, would be, would it need to be as vague as to say wording with the clerks and the advisory committee? Would that be safer versus, because if we move this and approve this, does that then mean that becomes the wording that we have to read?
No, because it says that they want a statement in the spirit of this.
Okay, great. So we'll get that up and we'll get it on the screen. Any further speakers? So we'll get that up in a moment. My question, I guess, that while we're working on that is, if I was, so hypothetically, I'm at this meeting, I read the words off, but if someone has, isn't able to hear me, then how are they going to know what I'm saying? Someone can help me with that.
Through the chair, again, in conjunction with the city clerk, I think what we would be looking at is some verbiage that would appear on each agenda. So that would include the print version that we have in limited quantities, the public agendas that are published on the city's website and so on. So it would be a visual statement as well.
Great. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further speakers? And we'll call the question. And we're voting. Mr. Katolik, you're next.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
All right, and we'll go to item number 11. And we see Ms. Chapman's here as well, and Mr. Katolik. Do you have a presentation, or do you want to go straight into PPM? I don't think there's anyone here for the PPM.
Through the chair, we have not presented, or we have not prepared a presentation given the nature of the report, but we're available for questions, obviously.
Perfect. So to be clean on this, we'll open up the public participation meeting. So get a mover and seconder. Councillor Cassidy, second by Councillor Usher. I'll get it up on the screen.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
All right, looking for any members who'd like to speak on this item. Going once, going twice, forever hold your peace, and look for a motion to close the public participation meeting. We're setting records today. And we're voting. And the results, Squire's not here, so.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
Well, thanks for coming, staff. Appreciate that. Yes, the recommendation, of course. Yes, important stuff. So, committee. This recommendation is up on the screen. Look for a mover and a seconder. Any speakers? Look for a seconder. I guess it has to be Usher or no one. I guess I could too. And we're call the question. And we're voting. And we just voted to kick off Armstrong and Squire from committee.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
All right, thank you for coming. So items for direction, number 12. We have a request from Councillor Van Holst, I believe. Councillor Van Holst, my apologies.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, of course, the city, we're very transparent, and we've got policies for accessing documents. The police is the same, and this is just the policy, the method required for me to access some information. So I'm just kind of following through with the formality here. So I hope unless people want me not to have information, I don't know that there's much more to say. Hope the committee will support it. Thank you.
Any speakers or anyone want to? Councillor Usher?
Well, Mr. Chair, I need to understand a little bit more clearer what we're looking for. And I'm also concerned about what we're going to do with this information. This is, the way I understand this is that there are 2 rallies and police had to be used. And therefore, we want to know how much it costs the police to do their job. Is this because we want to, I'm not so sure why we want this and what we're going to do with it. I wonder, maybe I shouldn't know, but at the same time, if I'm going to be part of council to say yes to the police, provide this information. You know, we don't generally tell the police what to do or how to do their job. And this is what I'm concerned about here. So maybe if the mover could help me out a little bit, I might be able to appreciate that.
Okay, yeah, Counselor, absolutely happy to do that. So, it disturbed me a bit that, people have been assaulted in front of, City Hall. So there's this violence that's happened there. And I think when that happens, it's pretty clear that we've lost our objectivity. And, these are very subjective matters that people are involved in. And when you can put some dollar values in front of it in terms of some implication, then I think that kind of pulls people's thoughts to somewhere where they're right. We've got, if we're going to have different groups that are opposing each other in ways that we think might be violent, and then have to police that, we should know what the costs are, and then we can say, here's the cost for this kind of behavior, and then maybe people will think twice about how they approach the different, their people with different opinions. So that's basically what I want to do, is just look at what the real cost of what we've been doing is.
And I thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I certainly appreciate that. My concern is that once we do this, we could go into a multitude of other things that the police are involved with that is not the normal duty. And everybody will want to know this cost. And I don't know how far we should go with something like this. This is my big concern about this. This is a police matter. And if the police want to say that, I could understand that they will just publicly say it. Or if they want to come here in the budget and say it costs us so much more money, so would you kindly reimburse us that? That's a different matter. But for us to just want this, the next thing you know, we'll want to know what it costs us as Buffdale. They'll want to know how much it costs them to ride go to White Oaks or travel along the 401. And I don't know. I'm a little concerned about asking for this information. Thank you.
I'll just come back to you, Councillor Van Hulst, because Councillor Cassidy, maybe she might have a question, so it'll be easier that way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for staff. We could request this. Do the police have to give us this information?
I'm not sure if we have anyone here who would know that. Who wants to pretend to be legal?
I could, through the chair, pretend to be legal, I guess, but my understanding is from just past discussions with the Police Services Act is that you can request, but they don't necessarily have to comply. But again, that might be a better question legal, but that is my general understanding.
Councillor Cassidy?
So that's what I thought as well, because it could be related to operational matters, and they definitely don't want to, give away what their strategies are when it comes to security at these kinds of things. So my concern is what would be done with this information. So let's say we had, I think we had at that rally, one group opposed by 4 other groups. So would we then send an invoice to those groups saying, okay, you caused this security concern, and so police had to respond, and so we want you to reimburse the police? I'm not sure we have any grounds to be able to do that. Same with the Bruffdale parties that sometimes take place. Who are we going to target there to get reimbursement? This is what the police do. This is why we have police, for these kinds of events where we require a security presence to keep everybody safe. There were a couple of incidents at, I think at both, there were 2 rallies altogether, and I think there were a small minor incidents at both of these rallies. The police were there, they kept the peace, they stopped the people from doing the things that they were doing, which again, I think were relatively minor. At the same time, I know that there have been allegations in the past that somehow this council was responsible for that rally, and somehow this council was therefore responsible for the large police presence, and I take huge acceptance to that. I personally never spoke one way or the other for this rally. I did attend the first rally to observe and see what was going on. Everybody has the right to, as we've discussed in the past, everybody has a right to gather. This is not a police state, and people have the right to gather and express their opinions in a peaceful way. And sometimes the size of the crowd warrants a police presence, just to make sure people are expressing their opinions in a peaceful way. So I won't move the councillor's motion. I don't, number one, the police will most likely not give us the information he's requesting for operational purposes. Number two, I don't see it being of any use to this council.
Councillor Squire?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the only comparison I have to this would be the Broughdale matters. That wasn't a protest, it was sort of a street party or whatever you want to call it, but the police were very proactive within days of releasing numbers in terms of overtime costs. I think it was $36,000 as to what it cost in overtime for police to be there. So they will do it, police, where I think they want to make it clear that community resources are being allocated to something that they wouldn't normally be allocated to. And I think in a way that's useful for the public to know what the cost of something is. And I think in the case of Broughdale, it was very useful for students and the community to know, hey, if something like this happens, there's a cost involved with it. So the challenge I'm having, and I would have to think about it, is Broughdale comparable to a protest at City Hall? And I don't know if I can make that that equation or that connection. So that's why I'm a little bit troubled by this.
So if you guys will allow me, through the chair, can I ask a question? Or if, just to be official, Councillor Usher, you could take it. Thanks. Back to me. Thanks for recognizing me, Chair. I had a question through you to... I'm the chair? Yeah, you're the chair. To you, to Councillor Van Holst. I guess my first question is, you know, have you directly reached out to the police board and asked for this information? And two, have you just tried to request a FOI?
Thank you very much. So there was, I think the council meeting after the event, the police were here. And I said to the police chief, I'd be interested in this information. And the police chief said to me, oh yeah, that's not a problem. You just have to make a request for that. And so I asked, where should I make the request? And it was said this committee. And so I came to this committee previously saying, here's the request I want. And it was suggested that I could just go ask them myself. That was the advice of the committee. And so I wrote the police services board and they say, no, you council has to make the request for this. And so, and I did have the clerk send to you that response from them. It says the way to get this information is to have council make a request and you can have it. But the police chief was very, very happy to provide it, and I think they're fine. It's just this is the process for having it happen, and so that's why I came back. Now that I know for sure what needs to be done to get the piece of information, I'll just. I have to come here and ask for it or ask for it at council. And of course, my purpose for it is the same as described by Councillor Squire. It's good to know what this cost was, because these things go on, like the party in his ward, and it's nice to know that there's a cost. This doesn't come free. And so maybe we should think twice about how we do these things, right? So the public will say, hey, here was the cost for policing. We should discourage groups from getting getting violent and in each other's faces. And I think I would prefer that would be the case. So that's why I want the information. It's just so that we know what these costs were.
And sorry, my second question that was missed was, did you try just doing an FOI?
No, I was told this was the method to do it. I'm not sure if a Freedom of Information Act works with these things. Perhaps staff can tell me. I don't know why I would do an FOI if there's already a process for council to get information, and this is it. I would just come here, and I've just been following the directions that I've been given at each point. So I followed the chief's directions, and when I came to this committee and you said, well, just go ask, I followed those directions too. I suppose I could do an FOI, but I don't know if that's appropriate. Perhaps staff could tell me.
Mr. Chair, through you, I guess, to finish my question off, I guess I'd like staff to ask us that the difference between an FOI and under which context, because I think I see legal here, which context are we making a request as a council? Are we doing it under the Police Service Act and compelling them to give us the specific information? If you could help me out there. And again, apologies to Councillor Van Holst for going around in circles with this.
Mr. Chair. So it depends on whether it is council as a whole that wants the information. If it's council as a whole that wants the information, then that would be done presumably through a resolution of council or a bylaw of council request for that record or records that you're searching for. There would have to be a municipal purpose for that request, and you'd have to determine what that municipal purpose is. If it's just a councillor who's asking for the information, then the councillor or any person can make an MFIPA request, a Freedom of Information request. And any person can, there's information online about how to make a Freedom of Information request. I have information which I printed off the internet. If any councillor wishes to obtain a copy that I printed off the internet, they're free to stop by and pick up the information about that. But it's accessible online on how to make Freedom of Information requests. And there is information as well about making Freedom of Information requests to the Police Services Board, as well as a phone number and an address as to how to make that request.
Any further question?
I have no further questions, but I'll just wrap up, Mr. Chair. I guess my question, I just wanted to say I appreciate the intent of the councillor, but to me at this stage, I feel as if, for me, and when I was in a position where I wanted some information in the past or advocacy, I had gone either directly to them or considered exploring FOI requests to get the information that I needed. I don't see, based on what the comments said by legal today, if we're going to sit here and try to find out the purpose, because council needs to have a purpose, a municipal purpose of getting this information. So I mean, I would just say I won't support this specific request, but if the councillor wants to, do an FOI request, I'd probably suggest that. And that'd be kind of my thing from now. Thanks.
Okay, any other discussion? I'll pass the chair back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Phenomenal job, by the way. You got all the names right. Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. And to Councillor Van Holst, I can sympathize with the frustration trying to get an answer to the question you're interested in. I have to tell you, I'm not interested in it really at all. And the reason I'm not is that the cost for policing on a regular day is $263,000 a day. $96 million divided by 365 days. Policing is expensive. The police have to deploy their resources all kinds of different ways depending on what's going on in the city. For example, when the bars empty out at night, there's a lot of police out there. The cost of policing during those hours when the bars are emptying out, that's higher than, in a different hourly period earlier in the same day. And frankly, that is up to the police. And that is up to the Police Services Board to deal with the budget of the police and how they deploy their resources operationally. Let us just assume, just for the purposes of trying to figure out how much this could cost, let's say maybe they sent 50 officers for an entire day, and each officer costs $110,000. So maybe that's $15,000. We are doing a lot of talking about this issue at council over something that maybe cost $15,000. I don't know. They may have done work in advance. I don't know how much time it is. It's not our issue. You know, it's the Police Services Board's issue. I'm happy to deal with the Police Services budget when it comes before us. I got lots of opinions about the Police Services budget. But getting into the details about how much did the Brofdale stuff cost and how much did this cost and how much did last Friday night when the bars empty out, I mean, that's not our job. And so I can understand why you're curious about it. I get it. I also do not believe that knowledge of this information is going to influence anybody's behavior in terms of the people who are at rallies. Nobody cares about this information. You know, $15,000, well, you know, I wouldn't have punched that guy if I knew it was going to cost the police $15,000 extra to deploy officers. I mean, those people are doing something wrong, and this information is not going to influence their future actions, I do not think. I don't think there's a realistic probability of that happening. You know, I really do not want to armchair quarterback the police and how they're deploying their resources. You know, I don't necessarily agree with how they prioritize all their calls and the ways they do those things. But I don't want us to be spending time here, you know, asking them for information about, frankly, a very small thing, which is the deployment on 1 or 2 days around a very specific event. I understand why you want it. I really don't want us to spend much time talking about it at council. I wish there was an easier way for you to get this information. And I think sending in a Freedom of Information request is a good idea.
Any further speakers? So seeing as if there's no mover or seconder on this, we do have to take some sort of action. So look to committee. If there's someone to, I believe the wording has to be either received or take no action, or there'll be some word. Sorry, Councillor Usher.
And we move that no action be taken. Oh,
Okay, so we'll get some wording up.
Yeah,
It's up. Any further speakers? And we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Number 13. No speakers, we'll just get it up on the screen. So there'll be some wording on this one because I believe the committee is rescinding a clause from this. So if you're wondering about that. So it's up on the screen. Feel free to read it if you like. Moved and look for a seconder. Any questions? And we're voting. Or I see people reading. Councillor Cassidy, are you reading or just smiling? All right, call the question. Councillor Rush, you're good.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Number 14, any speakers? I'll get the wording up. Look for a mover and a seconder on the screen. Look for a seconder. Don't be shy. All right. And Councillor Usher.
I just want to make a comment, and I think it's important because on the 1st of August, I stood up in this room and I announced that August 1st was Emancipation Day. And this is the second time I come across it implying, and I don't think that it's meant to be implied. I think it's meant to be just a deferred celebration for a specific purpose. But what I want to make clear is that the world understands that August the 1st is Emancipation Day for Canada, and that's a legislative date, not September. So this was a special, I'm talking about item 5 here. This was a special celebration that was done on this occasion to celebrate what they call a meeting tree in Pond Mills. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Usher. And the wording is up. No further speakers, we'll call the question. And we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Number 15, any speakers? And we'll get the wording up. Seeing no speakers, we'll call the question. Great job, guys. Oh, Councilor Cassidy, what's up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if the clerk could explain what the reconsideration is all about.
All right, let's break it down, clerk. Stand by, we're just translating that for you.
The reconsideration is required because council had already adopted their previous report, and they're looking to revise the wording of that particular clause.
Okay, so it's saying, delete A and change it to the new A, which has Councillors Hopkins, Huber, and Ridley, and other city representatives. Can you, what did A used to say? Does anybody know?
Working from memory, it was worded something to the effect of that those counselors be requested to meet with the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Advisory Committee. So they've just, it's still the same, it's the same players, but they've switched it up a little bit.
So do we need 2/3 vote for this? I mean, do we have to vote for 4 separately? That's my question. Okay.
All right, and we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Number 16, deferred matters. Anybody? Get a motion up in the meanwhile? All right, no speakers, we'll call the question. Oh, Councilor Cassidy.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, I just have, there are a number of items that just say estimated report back 2017. So, but no quarter is specified, or, so does that just mean by December 31st, we're gonna have an update on those items that just say 2017?
Through the chair, we will update these and give you a better estimate on the quarters for the next cycle.
Sounds good. No further speakers, we're voting. The results.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
We already dispensed of number 17, so we have one in-camera item, but what we'll do is related to the mayor's New Year's honor list, so we'll we'll handle that in-camera and adjourn from in there. So for members of the public, we won't be coming back in here, we'll just leave from out there, and when you see the door open, that's when you know we go home. So for staff, good night. And we'll look for a motion to move in camera. Councilor Armstrong Cassidy. And it's gonna be up on the screen.
Okay.
We'll vote. Some people will vote. I can second it. And we're voting. Great job, guys.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Full committee room. And we're in room number 3. So if everyone could just moonwalk their way in there, we'll get you out of here. And thank you, staff. And just want to thank the one member of public for sticking out all day. Thank you.